Welcome to Cape Breton Movers and Shakers, where we have conversations with people who are doing positive things here in Cape Breton. I'm Richard Lorway, president of goCapeBreton.com, and today I'm talking with Douglas Brown, who's a published author and owner of Boularderie Island Press in Ross Ferry, Cape Breton. Hi, Douglas.
Hello, Richard.
So, I'm presuming you were first an author. What made you decide to start a publishing company in Cape Breton?
Yeah, I know, sort of that chicken or the egg sort of question. But yes, I was a writer first. There were a lot of different reasons, but one of the things that I saw happening, I saw a lot of changes happening in the publishing sector while I was still actively writing. And one of them was that I was on the Board of Governors for the Writers Union of Canada. And I could see that online sales of books were going to become very important, probably sooner than later. And also that a lot of the larger publishers were giving up on what are called mid-list writers. So mid-list writers, they're not the writers that write bestsellers.
Not Sidney Sheldon or Stephen King, right?
Or Margaret Atwood, that would be a bestseller. But they're the people who actually pay the bills at these publishing houses. So they publish enough books to make it worthwhile to keep that author on. And it's sort of like a loyalty program. But many publishers stopped doing that. They started to let their mid-list writers go. And another thing that happened was that I had a rather successful book that came out, got wonderful reviews in the Globe and Mail. It won the Thomas Head Rattle Prize for Atlantic Fiction. But my publisher went bankrupt.
Oh.
So just at the point where I was going to see a return on the advance I had received for the book, they went bankrupt. And so I never did get a penny. And I thought, you know what, I think writers can do better on their own. Oh, and the other thing too that was happening was that the Writers Union of Canada at that time was also considering the possibility of allowing self-published writers to become members. And which is a little bit interesting because when that organization started 40 years ago, if you were a poet, you were not allowed to be a member.
Really?
So a lot of things have changed. So it was, a convergence of all of those factors. And the fact that I thought with especially bigger publishers outsourcing, like their promotion, their marketing, and also outsourcing editors and things, that writers needed to take more control. And I certainly wanted to take more control of my own career. So I created Boularderie Island Press. Our motto is for the writer, for the word. So that's a little bit of why I got, into the business of publishing.
Right. So how long have you been operating now?
Well, we hung out our shingle. I say we, the royal we. I hung out my shingle in 2012. So next year will be 10 years in business.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
Right. So if you had to describe the mission for Boularderie Island Press, what would it be?
Well, the mission, it's, of course, artistic merit is really important. Anything that we publish, we want to make sure it has that merit. As a regional publisher, as a micro publisher, I'm also committed to Atlantic Canadian writers, specifically like an onion with the layers going out, Cape Breton writers, Nova Scotia writers, other writers from Atlantic Canada, and the occasional writer from Ontario, for example. But probably 15 books by Cape Breton writers just in 9 years.
Right. Okay. So how do you position yourself in the market then?
Well, I'm a bit of an anomaly. There was some resistance, when I created my business, because some of the other established publishers, they looked at me as a vanity press. They still hadn't caught on to what was happening with the writers Union of Canada that they saw self-published books as being legitimate. And what's different between being vanity publisher and doing what we do, which is what are called co-publications, is that a vanity publisher will take your money and publish anything. Right. And they don't really edit it. And then there are all these add-ons, like it only costs you this much, but if you do this, we can do that. And if you do this, this, and this. So one of the things I knew I really had to do was to make sure that I had a team of professional editors. And again, I wanted editors that were published writers, not editors that had come out of university with an MA in English or creative writing. I wanted people who knew their way around the block, so that when they were working with other writers, there would be sort of an empathy there, an understanding of what they were going through. So all of our co-published books are professionally edited. We also do what are called trade publications, and like regular trade publications are books where we pay in advance against royalties, and then they get like 10% of royalties once that advance is paid back. But our most successful books are the books that we co-publish, because those writers have a financial stake in it.
Right.
And as soon as you are investing your own money, you're going to go a step further.
You're going to go on tour. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we also try to do is to make sure that for 18 months after the publication, that the title still has legs, that it's still out there in the minds of the public and for bookstores. Other publishers, they sort of stop after 90 days, once the book is published, sent out, and they move on to another writer.
Yeah.
So we do.
They're looking for home runs, basically, right?
Well, they are. Absolutely. And we're not. We're looking at building up relationships. So the very first book I co-published was a novel called The Promised Land, a novel of Cape Breton, written by Bill Connell, who lives on the North Shore. And lo and behold, it went and won the Stephen Leacock National Award for Humor. And they were one of the first national awards organizations that recognized co-publications between authors and publishers. So that was a real vote of confidence. And sort of the naysayers started to look at me very differently after that. And a lot of our writers, I have writers that they're going on to their second, third book. So we do provide that comfort and that belief in them, and are not looking for the next bestseller. We're looking at helping them to expand their career, and I think that's missing in a lot of publishing.
Right, they're not willing. They don't have the bandwidth to invest in people. They just have so much on the go that yeah. Okay, how many writers do you represent or co-publish with?
Okay, this is a tough question.
Okay.
6 years ago, I could sort of count them off on my fingers. But now when I'm up at the podium and I'm doing a book launch, I have to look to make sure I'm getting the right author to the right book. I think 25 writers we have published. Last autumn, so that would have been November 2021, we actually published our 50th title.
Wow.
Which is a lot of books for a micro press like us. And I mentioned that next year will be our 10th anniversary. And you would know this because of your knowledge with small businesses. There aren't many small businesses that survive to 10 years. And
no, less than half usually.
Yeah. And just like those businesses that eventually get success, this is not my first one. I made my mistakes with 2 or 3 other businesses before that. So, you live and learn and go from there. Yeah.
So some of the authors, tell me about some of your authors that I might have heard of.
Okay, well, there's Bill Connell that I mentioned. Oh my goodness. This is
hard not to pick favorites, I guess, because you don't want
No, I just don't want to leave anybody out. But
of course,
yeah, Julie Kerwin, for example, her day job is a psychiatrist, and I published her first book last year, and it won the Alistair MacLeod Award for short fiction at this year's Atlantic Book Awards.
Right.
And I will be doing a novel with her that'll come out in a couple of years. I've done 2 westerns, which is really interesting, with a writer by the name of Mona Knight, and where the protagonist is this female gunslinger. And again, that was taking a bit of a risk, doing genre fiction in Cape Breton westerns, but there are a lot of people that love westerns, so we're also risk takers. We've done 2 books with Charlotte Mutual. We've done a book with Donna Troisek from Glace Bay. Oh my golly, who am I missing?
Yeah, it's kind of an unfair question. I apologize for that.
Yeah, but then writers that have come to us later, like Robert McKinnon, we're publishing his 3rd book next year. So the first one we did was called Shipwrecked, north of 40, and it was all about his career as a salvager, hunting treasures and things like that.
Yeah.
So for those I have that are not coming to my mind right now, I apologize.
Okay. Hopefully they'll be kind and
yeah.
So you also publish poetry too. Now I can't imagine there's a huge market for that.
Well, there isn't, and I mean, we started. We have published a few collections of poetry. Poetry collections, even with the publishers that specialize in poetry, print runs are not very big.
No.
But what we found is it's a hard sell. If we're publishing poetry and prose, for example, Charlotte Mutual's 2nd book is a combination of short stories and poetry. We printed more of those than her first book, which was just poetry, but her first book sold out. So, but it is a hard sell. And we're finding increasingly that all fiction is becoming a really hard sell. And we're moving more towards nonfiction. There seems to be a bigger audience for that here in Atlantic Canada than fiction. We'll continue to do fiction, but we're up against so many other people.
Gotcha. So is there a community of writers on the island? There
are many. And actually next week, I'm not sure when this is airing, but on November 13th, I'm producing an event. It's called November Sonata. And I'm featuring 8 writers, not just writers from Boularderie Island Press, but other writers like Leslie Crew, a writer from Whitney Pier called Christine McKinnon. And we're doing a tribute to Beatrice McNeill. And it really is Beatrice McNeill who, I would say, created a thirst, the original thirst for audiobooks in Cape Breton, because out of her home, when she was living in East Bay, she would invite writers to come and do readings. And that became very, very, very popular. And then she moved out to public venues. And so she had created this platform called Fiddles and Prose. So there would be writers and music, very successful. And, she would feature writers, very well-known writers like Alistair MacLeod, Sheldon Curry, and up-and-coming writers as well. And if you fast forward, we now have the Cabot Trail Writers Festival, which I think is in its 10th year, or maybe next year it's 10th year. Mm-hmm. They bring in writers from all across the country, and you have numerous writers groups around the island. So these would be writers getting together, not necessarily to be published, but just to be in the company of other writers, usually mentored by somebody, with a book that's published. And we also have quite a few book clubs in Cape Breton, and book clubs are big buyers of books. Right. So, we always say that Cape Breton is known so much for its music, but really it's known as much for its writers and its storytellers. So it's a good place to operate a small business.
Gotcha. So I'm sure you've seen lots of disruption in the public industry in the last number of years, experienced it
Yeah.
personally in many
Yeah.
ways. So how do you compete with the major the publishers and those folks?
Well, it's not really about competing. It's about, I think as a publisher, you have to make sure that what you're doing is a little bit different from what other publishers are doing, so that you can create your own niche, know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are. There is a lot of groundwork. I spent a tremendous amount of time creating relationships with independent bookstores, retailers that sell books seasonally.
Right.
And you nurture those relationships. And that's very important. If you're not doing that, books are not going to sell. Yeah. And also having, an online platform is really important. We were one of the first to start selling our books online. That's very important as well. And as I said, other publishers, well, most publishers were a little late catching up. We were sort of ahead of that. The difference between what I was doing then and what they're doing now is that I had no money. So I was, learning all of this from scratch with very little money. But a lot of these publishers have a lot of money. So they've been able to catch up by bringing in expert tech people and stuff like that. So that's been a big change. COVID-19 obviously changed things. Most bookstores were closed last year.
Right.
But that also opened up another opportunity for independent bookstores to also create an online presence so that they could offer books online, just as Amazon does or Chapters Indigo.
Right. Okay. So where do you see the future for Boularderie Island Press?
It's complicated. It's always complicated. Like I say, COVID-19, nobody was expecting that. There are other things that can happen. For example, you could have a major strike by Canada Post just when the holiday season is opening up. And this happened a couple of years ago. There was a threat of a strike. And if that happens and you have no control over it, you're basically missing out on maybe 50% of your sales.
Right.
So there are all these things that you have no control over. But I think one of my biggest fears is that that artistic merit and freedom of expression has really come under fire of late, and that we live in this increasingly politically correct environment. So if you're not showing diversity, and we certainly do, it could be hard to get your books out there. And there's a lot of this cancel culture.
Right.
We've experienced and will continue to experience situations where a writer might write about something that happens in Bermuda, but they've never been to Bermuda. And there are a lot of people that think that's not right. It's not an authentic voice. That if you...
So what happened to imagination and all this?
Well, yes. That's what's under fire. And I have an African-Canadian background, but if I was to, as a novelist, write a book, and perhaps if my protagonist was Black, I might come under fire for that, for cultural appropriation. And I don't believe in that. I believe that, we should still be able to use our imaginations. We should still be able to imagine a world and set ourselves in other people's shoes. And remember, this is all fiction.
Right.
And I find that is under threat, and that is really disconcerting.
Right. Okay. So one last question. It's kind of an open-ended one. If you had one piece of advice for a writer, struggling writer trying to break through, what would you tell them?
I would basically tell them to be persistent. I would advise them to be polite.
Polite is good.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how many people will approach a publishing house, and if they don't like your answer, they'll want to get into a debate, and then you just have to move on. Also, if you're a budding writer, You really do need to find that writers group, join a book club, join your provincial writing organization, take workshops, because you will learn. And if you don't do that, you're not going to learn. And through doing all of these, foundation things, you're building up your resources, you're building up your network. And I do see that often where writers, I ask them, there's a submission guidelines and it says, do you belong to this organization, this, and this, and it's like, no. Well, that's really important. And I really do believe that people don't understand how important it is. When there's submission guidelines from a publisher, read them. They're there for a reason. And if you do engage with a publisher, listen to what they're saying. Their opinion may be wrong, but again, don't be rude about it. Move on to the next person.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
Good.
super. I think that's helpful, hopefully, for some people out there.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time today, Douglas.
Well, thank you.
I've been speaking with Douglas Brown, owner of Boularderie Island Press, and we'll see you next time on Cape Breton Movers and Shakers.